We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
And I love this topic because it's Irish.
It is.
It's got a lot about Irish mining. Mining was really big in Ireland and Scotland and just kind of that whole area. But here we go.
Today we're going to talk about Tommyknockers.
You know, I never knew Tommyknockers was anything except the movie. I'd heard of the movie, but other than that,
I don't know that I've heard of the movie.
it's a Stephen King movie. I think it's a book. I think he wrote a book and then they made a movie.
I would assume. What's the premise of that?
I don't know.
Movie/book.
Never seen it.
Me either. Probably was not a commercial success, or maybe it was, and I just have no clue. But the lore.
Yeah, I was like, it's a paranormal thing? Sweet.
But it doesn't have anything to do with Tommy Hilfiger, right?
No, that's close.
Something different?
Yeah, Tommyknockers don't design clothes.
Okay.
That is one thing I do know. We were, tasked to talk about Tommyknockers, and I learned a little bit. You have these tales of small, little mini-sized peoples that generally originated from, England, Scotland, Ireland. Wales as well. Everyone knows about leprechauns, and they're kind of known to be mischievous little turds that go around and cause problems.
And don't they color your toilet water green these days?
Yeah, and they also are mascots for breakfast cereal. They do that.
Lucky Charms.
That's right.
We need a Tommyknocker cereal.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And wouldn't that be delicious?
Tommyknocker cereal. Damn, we got an idea, guys. Let's run with it. There's Scottish brownies. I don't know how many people have heard of brownies.
And you're not meaning like the baked goods. You're meaning like...
Not the baked goods.
At some point, we'll get serious here, folks. I promise.
Not the Girl Scouts either, although they are little individuals.
And some of them are from Scotland?
They're probably from Scotland. But brownies, they are small creatures, little human-like creatures that live in your house. And apparently, if you put a bowl of cream out, they will do tasks around the home. So they'll clean your house. They'll do your laundry. So I
need one.
It's worth giving it a shot, guys. That's all I'm saying is maybe put a bowl of cream and maybe, magic will happen.
Maybe my laundry will magically get done. See, Chad already thinks the laundry magically gets done.
It does.
And you don't even put out a bowl of cream. So you got leprechauns, you got brownies, and then there's Tommyknockers. So Tommyknockers originate from kind of Wales, Welsh, Cornish folklore. They are generally described as 2-foot-tall individuals. They have human-like features, maybe a little bit more wrinkly with white whiskers. And they're associated with the mines. So, go ahead.
In some of the things I've read, it did say they were considered green.
Green?
Like green skin colored, which I thought, that sounds like a leprechaun.
Yeah, well, they're like I said, they're earlier, maybe not on this podcast, but they are the blue-collared leprechaun, pretty much.
2 feet tall, green.
Yeah, disproportionately large heads. That was another thing they mentioned.
But they wear miner's clothes, which does not sound like Tommy Hilfiger at all.
And there's a Tommyknockers movie. There's also a leprechaun movie.
Awesome. It was awesome. Not.
I'm the leprechaun.
Are we talking about the old one from the 50s, 60s?
No, I'm thinking
70s or 80s.
70s or 80s Halloween leprechaun. The evil leprechaun. Anyway.
Oh, no, Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
No, not that. That wasn't that one.
Okay.
No, this is the leprechaun. All right, back on task here. So these Tommyknockers, they live in mines, reportedly, at least based on folklore. And these miners would say, when things would go missing in the mines, if they had their food down there or their tools and they couldn't find them, they would blame the fact that their stuff was missing on these little mischievous turds called Tommyknockers. And, I thought about where the hell did the name Tommyknocker come from?
Okay.
I mentioned it to my wife and she thought it was some inappropriate something or another. So I said, no, the knocker part comes from a knocking sound. And so there's two different takes on these Tommyknockers. One is that they're just these little mischievous elf-like things that go and steal your stuff. And the other one is that they're pretty diabolical, and you can hear them knocking before these caves, or before the mines collapse.
So they're knocking out the supports and the things to make the mine collapse on
right.
the people.
So these are evil little characters that are going around and causing mines to collapse and killing people, which doesn't sound nearly as cute as these little guys who steal your food.
So could they possibly be a little combination of both, depending on their mood?
I suppose they could be.
Like, you're in a bad mood, you knock the walls down. You're in a good mood, you fold your laundry.
Yeah, it's just like the brownies.
Kind of like me.
Be afraid. And so that was one of the takes, is that, these are malevolent creatures that are, out to kill the miners. A lot of people say, well, right before mines collapse, you tend to hear the supports start to creak or break.
Or knock.
Or knock, and you can hear the earth shifting before everything comes collapsing down. And that's the knocking sound that people are hearing before the mines collapse. But some people are convinced that there are these little creatures that are causing the collapse.
So when you start hearing the knocking, it's time to get out of the mine.
Get out of Dodge, guys, because it's going down. Exactly. So this all originated over in Wales. It was, when people immigrated over to the United States, they brought this legend with them. They started working in the mines again in Pennsylvania.
A lot of Pennsylvanias.
Lots of Pennsylvania, and they, and even clear out to Colorado, Nevada, California. You hear stories of Tommyknockers as well.
One of the things I thought interesting is about in the 1820s, Cornish miners were really welcomed. Mining goes back a long, long time. If you've watched the movie, it's on Netflix, it's Poldark. Chad and I have watched it, and it's fabulous if you need a Netflix series
Binge
to watch.
watching.
And one of the key things that they do in Poldark is mining. It's a very integral part of the movie. And it takes place in Cornwall. So if you want to see kind of what this was like at the time, then give that show a watch. But what they would do, that's my little pup, he wants to get involved in this podcast. So what the miners in the United States would do is they would go to these Cornish miners, because they're excellent miners, been doing it forever. And they would say, trying to recruit, and they would say, hey, do you have any relatives in England who might want to come work the mines? And the Cornish miners would say things like, and I'm going to try to do this in my best Cornish accent, which is not going to be very good. I'll just put that out there now. It says, well, me cousin Jack over in Cornwall would come, could ye pay his boat ride? That didn't sound Cornwallish at all. So,
except the ye part, probably the ye part, yeah.
Yeah. And the is, I dropped the H. If ye pay is boat ride.
Perfect.
That's about as good as you're going to get. So they would do it because it was worth it to them to pay that boat fare to get these Cornish miners over here. And so a lot of these immigrants would come over, and they took on the nickname Cousin Jacks. And they were actually the core of America's early mining force. And not only in Pennsylvania, but even into the California Gold Rush.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it sounds like after they came over to the United States, the kind of perception of what Tommyknockers were became a little more ghostly than elvish, I guess I could say. It's more almost like spirits that are, giving you these warning signs of impending doom, mine collapse kind of stuff.
Yeah, and some of it was thought maybe spirits of miners that had died in mine collapse and were then trying to either warn or be vindictive.
So less leprechaun-y, more ghostly.
More ghost-like. We actually watched a YouTube video last week about a fellow who went into a mine and experienced an actual Tommyknocker. He just heard some knocking. It scared him. He ran out. But yeah, they're still around in the empty mines.
Well, yeah, it's pretty interesting too. I mean, we talked about into the 1920s, even as late as 1956. I found a story where
Let's hear this story.
So there was a large mine that closed in 1956, and the owners sealed, the entrance and all the other, the entrance of the mine off. And there were these 4th, 5th, and 6th generation cousin Jacks, like you mentioned, who literally circulated a petition that called on the mine owners to set the knockers free. We need to release the Tommyknockers so that they could move on to other mines.
Here's a little interesting tidbit that The Cornish believed that they were souls of the Jews who crucified Christ and were sent by the Romans to work as slaves in the mines.
Whoa,
And
that's
so-
loaded. Whoa, loaded.
Yes, and
Jeez.
their belief was so strong that, according to them, the Tommyknockers were allegedly never heard on Saturdays, nor at the times of Jewish festivals. So if you mind on Jewish festivals or Saturdays,
You weren't going to hear Tommyknockers.
you're good. No
The-
Tommyknockers.
Wow, devoutly religious Jewish ghosts.
Yes.
Got it.
So yeah, just throw that little tidbit in there.
My goodness.
Yeah, and it's just funny because these, you get these lore and these theories, and they just go all over the place. Because I feel like I told Doc something he didn't know, which is really, really hard to do because he knows a lot of stuff.
I knew nothing about that, so thank you. My mind is still a little blown here, thinking that over. Jeez.
So I found a fun story about Tommyknockers. It's called A California Ghost Story, and it's retold by a gentleman named S.E. Schlosser. And like we've been saying, Tommyknockers are in part thought to be spirits of dead miners. I kind of like the Jew theory, but that's not related in the story.
I'm trying to figure out how the Jew thing got tied into the
I don't know.
mining in, Welsh and Cornish folklore, but hey.
I just give the facts as I find them off of Google, however factual that may be. So, anyhow, according to this story, they're of the belief that they're departed miners that are helping the miners, living miners find ore, and to warn them of a cave-in by knocking. And so, he says if you hear a Tommyknocker knocking, it's best to depart. Whether they're doing it to help you or whether they're pissed off when they're knocking the supports down, it's still best to leave. And they've saved some miners in danger. And some folks say that the very first man to hear the sound is jinxed, but that's not necessarily always the case. It's good to stay on the good side of Tommyknockers, and like we've mentioned, they'll leave out little tidbits of food to kind of placate them. But there's this one unlucky miner named Eddie who became a target of the Tommyknockers. They drove him crazy. They would pelt him with stones, they would steal his tools, they would often blow out his lantern, and he could not figure out why they had singled him out until one day he actually heard a voice calling to him from the dark. Now, there was a shaft nearby that was like the opening of a shaft, and it was really dark, and the Tommyknocker said, "Eddie, I want my $5." And Eddie was so startled that all the tools he was holding, he just, they fell on the ground. And he said that the voice sounded just like his old friend named Joe, who had died in a cave-in a few months ago. And Eddie had borrowed $5 from Joe and had never returned it. So Eddie goes to the shaft, and sure enough, there was Joe's ghost, shrunk to the size of a 2-foot dwarf with a big ugly head, large ears, and a crooked nose. And he had kind of a peaked hat and a leather jacket, and the boots that he was wearing were just water-soaked. And the Tommyknocker was not very pleased to see Eddie because he was pissed off because Eddie never paid him back. And he said, "Give me back my $5, Eddie." And Eddie looked at him and said, "I don't have any money on me, Joe." And he kind of, pulled his pockets out to show, I indeed don't have a ghost is looking at you. You're like, "Dude, I seriously don't have $5 with me."
A leprechaun ghost.
I know your friend is like all shrunken and his head's
Dressed
turned
as a
grotesque. Going, "Oh crap!" I mean, and this isn't like, from the movie Better Off Dead. I want my $2. It's not a kid on a bike. This is like a creepy ghost, right? And the Tommyknocker says, "Yeah, I've heard that before. Didn't believe it then. I don't believe it now." And then poof, the Tommyknocker disappeared. And Eddie's sitting there uneasy. He's kind of, crap. What's he going to do next? And now I know why he's pissed off, and I don't have $5. So what's going to happen to me? So, he's like walking around all day, just uneasy, kind of freaked out. But all day long, he was plagued by that Tommyknocker. His ladder was shooken really hard so that he almost fell off. He could hear loud tapping noise of an invisible drill that just almost drove him nuts. Not like the tapping of "get out," but kind of a different drill sound. He just missed being buried by a rock fall, And no matter what happened, all day long, he kept hearing this voice, "Give me back my $5, Eddie, give me back my $5." So finally, he's being driven nuts, and finally says, "All right, Joe, all right." And he yelled it into the mouth of this tunnel that he had seen, the shaft. And he says, "I'll get your bloody $5. And so he left work for the day. And, back then, you didn't just leave work for the day because money was hard to come by and mining was hard work. But he's like, "Fine, I'll leave." And so he made the long climb to the surface, because back then they didn't have fancy elevators and conveyors to get you up and down. And he got home, and he took $5 silver from the money box that he kept under a loose board in his bedroom. He climbed back down the mine and stuck the $5 in a crack in the wall next to where Joseph's spirits had appeared to him. So he went back to that shaft, found a crack in the wall, put in these 5 silver pieces. And the Tommyknocker, Joe, appeared again and said, "It's about bloody time." And he kind of looked into the crack, like he's counting it, making sure it's all there. And Eddie said, "Are you going to leave me alone now?" And the Tommyknocker grinned, kind of maliciously at Eddie and said, "Maybe." And he scooped up the dollars and disappeared.
Wow. Okay.
So there you go. There's a real life Tommyknocker story.
So are they good? Are they bad? Or do they just want $5?
They just want
They
their
just want
money.
$5,
I
man.
want my $5.
I mean, that 5 for $5 at Arby's is
Pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. So I mean, I would maybe try to kill someone for one of those, but probably not. So but that's the big debate, right? Are these things? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they spirits? Are they not? And through kind of my studies on what Tommyknockers were, how did they get to America, right? Because, sure, we'll give you the whole, deceased miners thing from, Welsh and Cornish folklore, or maybe these Jews that were involved in the crucifixion of Jesus. There was, Cornish legend says that these Tommyknockers literally jumped into the suitcases of these Cornish miners and came over to the United States. Yeah. And it makes, obviously, from a folklore standpoint, how did they get here? As a creature, I guess you would have to jump into a suitcase.
Some kind of a stowaway somewhere. Somehow.
Maybe as a spirit, you could be some form of an attachment. Not sure. Something to think about, I guess.
So there's a mine in England, and it's called the Wheel Roots Mine. It's spelled Wheal. It's actually now called the Poldark Mine because it's the one that they feature in the show Poldark. And I know I keep bringing that up, but it's a really good show. You really should watch it. And it's believed to be Britain's deepest mine. And it was most active as a mine in 1720 for about 60 years. So 1720 to about 1780 is when it was active. And it's mostly abandoned starting in the 20th century. A little bit of mining after 1780, but not a whole lot. And according to Haunted Britain, the mine is known for seeing swirling mists that materialize in photographs. And one time in that mist that materialized, in one of the photos or just a short video, there was a brown-clad figure that materialized in it and then vanished.
Interesting.
Yeah, I also read that there were a lot of times I'll see lights in the mine as well.
The green lights down.
That'll kind of glow.
And in the same Poldark mine, they have, there's a long dead miner that roams the tunnels, and they hear him. He's not seen, but a paranormal group that went down in this mine to do some investigating captured a stream of foul-mouthed abuse when they were doing an EVP recording.
Interesting.
And then there was a woman known as Dorcas who died, and she started haunting this mine. And she took a fancy to one of the miners and followed him around. And she kept saying his name to get his attention. And one day she said it so many times that the miner finally had to leave. And so, I don't know, would you consider her a Tommyknocker? Can women be Tommyknockers? Am I being a sexist jerk?
Well, it's interesting. Looking at some of the superstitions behind Tommyknockers, you mentioned putting out food to try to keep them from, doing mischievous things or bad things. A lot of the miners also believed that it was bad luck for a woman to go into the mine, especially if she had red hair.
Now, see, this fellow that left because Dorcas was bothering him. Shortly after he left the tunnel where he'd been working, the ceiling collapsed where he
So,
was.
If it's bad luck for a woman to go into the mine, would it be really bad luck for a woman Tommyknocker to be there?
Right. So
Sounds
the
bad.
fact that she was there, was that the bad luck that made it cave in? Did the Tommyknockers get pissed off that there was a woman
Or
there?
was she aware that it was going to fall and wanted him out?
Yeah, maybe she was trying to scare him out, guys.
I like the woman was there, it's bad luck, and the Tommyknockers knocked the ceiling down. And feminists are going to get mad at me over that, but you know what?
Another interesting superstition they mentioned was these miners, they put their clothes on these hooks before and after work. And if their clothes slipped off the hook in the changing room, it meant that they were going to fall into a hole. So think about that all day if you find your coat on the ground.
Make sure you hook up your clothes really, really well.
Yeah, and they also mentioned that if a miner's lamp didn't burn bright enough underground, it meant that his wife was out with another man. So, yay for mining superstitions. So that'd be the worst day ever. A female goes into your mine, chases you out, your coat's on the ground, and your lamp doesn't work.
So there's a guy named James McKillop, and he also talks about how they were the spirits of the Jews, right? So it comes from a couple different areas. But he says that there are also several stories that claim that the Tommyknockers are spirits of people who weren't good enough for heaven, but not evil enough for hell.
Kind of purgatory-ish.
So if you're kind of in that middle, a little bit good, a little bit bad, you might be a Tommyknocker. And he said, and this is a quote from him, "That said, I'm sure plenty of those early miners would consider the mines a form of hell." And I'm sure with just the safety features that they did not have and everything, I'm sure it was. But one of the things that Tommyknockers also do is a belief that they draw attention to new rich seams with their knocking. And so if they knock, sometimes you follow the knocking to find a new vein of whatever it is you're mining. So then you're kind of plagued with, I hear knocking. Do we run because it's going to collapse? Or do we run away because it's going to collapse? Or do we run towards because there's new stuff to get?
Right. It sounds like 2 knocks meant dig here, and 3 knocks meant
Get out.
get the heck out.
So going back to the movie that we were watching, the Poldark, I found it interesting the way they portrayed a lot of the miners and the jobs, and it's like you think, wow, this is like the worst job in the world. Why would anybody want to do this job? And it's called because you get fed, because you make money and you can, have food for your wife and your children. And I think a lot of us in today's world don't really take that into account as we look at why people did the things that they did and the kind of jobs that they did. It was just so, in Poldark, they show that when the mines had to close and there were different things, just the poverty, and people were literally starving to death.
Yeah, they closed those mines, and it literally ruined the economy of
Cornwall, the whole
area.
district. And very interesting to see that from a historical standpoint, because we think about it, it's like, oh, you got laid off, and it's go, okay, well, we'll get some money from the government, we'll get our unemployment. No, back then, if you weren't working, you didn't have food, and you could starve to death, and you would get thrown out of your tenements, and very, very important. And it's like, how could anybody even work like that? It's like, work or die.
Right, in the early days of the United States, same thing. You're working in the coal mines in Pennsylvania, or you're coming way out west and working silver mines in Nevada. What else are you going to do in the middle of the desert when you have no other skills or assets to put to use? You can't just open a mercantile or open a store because you don't have the money. You're going to go work in the mines because it's life or death. That's what you're going to do.
So, and we touched on this a little earlier, but the Cornish miners have been mining for so long and were so skilled at it. They were very, very sought after, to the point that the mine owners would pay for them to come over. But they knew that they were well sought after, and so they had some demands of their own. And their demands were that they would not mine. They would not even go in there unless the mining managers assured them that there were helpful spirits in the mines. So I'm sure a lot of these managers were like,
Yeah, they're helpful.
okay.
Promise me there's good Tommyknockers. Okay.
And then there's a couple things about Tommyknockers that I think is interesting. There were some funny superstitions that go with it. Miners won't whistle when they're in the mines because the Tommyknockers don't like whistling, but you can sing. Singing was okay, whistling was not okay. The Tommyknockers hate crosses, and so miners are very careful not to wear crosses or even leave their tools in a cross shape. If they set them down, they had to make sure that they weren't crossed. And they also took care to never speak ill of Tommyknockers because that would piss the Tommyknockers off and they would, be mean to you. They'd steal your stuff.
And make your mind collapse.
And then they said if they heard Tommyknockers follow them out of the mine because they never, ever, ever left the mine, but if they did hear the knocking outside of the mine, it was a sure sign of impending death because it was just so
Unusual
for the Tommyknocker to leave.
These guys from Cornwall took their Tommyknockers seriously.
They did. They didn't mess around, did they?
Mm-mm.
Well, apparently some other wives did because their lights went down.
Yeah, if they had dim lamps. Eek. Like I said, worst day ever.
Yeah, and in Nevada, the belief in Tommyknockers went well past the 1930s to the point that some miners even made statues of the spirits out of clay and left them in the mines to guard the tunnels.
Interesting. Yeah, and it was Nevada in that YouTube video you're watching where the Tommyknocker happened. That was a mine, a hard rock mine in Nevada, where that YouTube video with the Tommyknockers and the guy that got freaked out by it.
I'm pretty sure Tommyknockers made a cameo on Ghost Adventures as well in an episode I saw where they went into a mine and they talked a little bit about the lore, the stories behind the Tommyknockers.
Now, if you're into local brews, in Idaho Springs, Colorado, there is a beer brewery called the Tommyknockers. So, if you want to get a little bottle of brew that says the Tommyknockers with a little picture of a miner, there you go.
Colorado Springs.
Idaho Springs,
Colorado.
Haha. Because that's not confusing.
Get those states mixed up.
We talked about how the belief in Tommyknockers and the superstition lasted, well into the 1950s. This is a story from a man in California. His name's Alan McLaren. And he says, "My father grew up in a mining camp in Confidence, California. His father worked at the Confidence mine. Father's stories of those times included the Tommyknockers. His father said that his mother would bake saffron cake for his father to take with him. And when the miners, which they called the cousin Jacks, finished their day, they always left some saffron cake for the Tommyknockers. To not do so was very bad luck." And he said that he grew up in Ohio, the man that's relating this story, and he said every time his grandmother came to visit, she would bake a small saffron cake for the family.
That's quite interesting.
So, Doc, you had some information on the movie.
I found out that it was a TV miniseries, The Tommyknockers. It has terrible reviews. Let's just start there.
I wonder how the book was.
I don't know. Probably better than the movie based on everything I've seen here. Oh my gosh, these are scathing reviews. But there's some promising news that they might turn the Tommyknockers into a full-length feature film.
Ooh.
Thumbs up, guys.
Better than the TV series.
One can only pray based on the 28% Rotten Tomatoes reviews. Ouch.
So, in closing, let's talk about our Supernatural Hour swag. We can get that at our app's website, the Advanced Paranormal website. Go to the merchandise tab, and you can get to TeePublic from there, and you can get cool Supernatural Hour swag. Mugs, cups, shirts.
Who needs tapestries?
I got a bumper sticker.
You got the bumper sticker?
And a shirt, yep. And I already
sweet.
mentioned the mug, I think, in the last podcast.
Yeah. Very cool.
So I am rolling in Supernatural Hour swag now.
So go on out and get your Supernatural Hour paraphernalia. It's kind of fun to have. We enjoy seeing it around.
Stay spooky, my haunty friends.
I love you, Nicholas.
Good night. Have a good one.
Hey, good night.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright 2021 by Advanced Paranormal Services.